I'm very clear on the nature of these grooming gangs, that they were protected because of the fear of community relations. Then the investigations will not just be in Oldham, not just be in Bradford, because there are a couple of grooming gang epicentres across this country. If it was middle class kids, it would not have been happening.
Oh no.
They're desperate to silence us, and that desperation results in a renter mob.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. As you can see, we're in the office again, and I've got a live guest, a gentleman you've heard of and a gentleman you know all about, hopefully, especially been watching my videos. First of all, let's welcome Miah to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Thanks for inviting me around. I'm computerless at the moment there, so I'm offering to people, I'll come and visit you, and you took me up on it.
Right. Is that why? Because you
oh yeah,
you've not got a computer, you wait to get a new one.
Yeah, it's blown up. Yeah, it's had it 10 years. It's all right,
Right, yeah, 10 years. I'm surprised any program would run on it after 10 years.
Well, that's what the lad who I have look after my stuff came round, and he looks at me and just started shaking his head. He says, they stopped updating me, but it works.
Yeah, exactly. And you're used to it, and got your programs on it.
It's like a member of my family. I mean, it's like a cat or something. It's like my computer in the corner. But no, it's had it. So I'm just pulling the pennies together. I'm nearly there, and I'll go and hopefully be set up again next week. But it's a nice day, and it's thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Let's jump into this. So we again bumped into each other on Saturday afternoon in Manchester city centre. We were at the Save the Children event. We gave speeches about how we need to protect our children, and the surprising thing for me was that was the first time I've been to one of those types of events, and we were protested.
There was a counter protest of some form, wasn't there? I mean, I don't, I'm particular with my words. So first and foremost, I described what we attended as a rally. I think, people who were of a like mind, who could come together in solidarity and share their viewpoints, and that we're right on this, history will judge us, and and put names to faces, because I'm sure it's the same with you. A lot of the people who support me, and I'm eternally grateful to, it's a name on it's a name on YouTube, or a name on one of my streams that I do. So I genuinely enjoy meeting people. We are of our generation where we'd be sent on trains, planes to meetings where we would meet people face to face, and the value of meeting face to face, and I really enjoy giving my time to that when those opportunities arise. So I gave up my Saturday and I went, and I immediately felt uncomfortable because I got off the tram on Exchange Square, and I walked up through the Andale, and I came out, and I'm looking, and the counter protest, the first phrase I heard from the counter protesters were Nazi scum off our streets. And it was cut, and I'm looking at them, and I'm thinking, I've come to speak at this event, which is about safeguarding children, demanding that we put an end to the horrific industrial scale cover-up of the gang rape of children, of our children, as acknowledged by every politician. And forgetting that, the Labour Party have even acknowledged this now. The Conservatives are leading the crusade. Reform are using this, as one of their key agenda items, because it was on their manifesto at the last general election. And suddenly I've become a Nazi. And I'll tell you what I did. The first thing I did was I walked past everyone, and I went to the Costa Coffee up to Piccadilly, got myself a coffee, and I walked back and I'll be honest, you part of me said to myself, Roger, go on. Before I'd even, and I'm like, no, I can't do that. There are decent people from it, and we've got to challenge these people. So I walked in, it was surrounded by police, ring fenced by police. So the police are looking at me, first of all, wondering why is this brown-faced guy going and standing with the Nazis? Yeah. And I went, and you spoke, others spoke. And in the main, I was so proud. And I'll share with you why. When I first came across a protest of any form around the grooming gangs. It was in Rochdale. I was doing some work on counter-terrorism there. The government had sent me to Rochdale for some reason. And it was a Saturday I was there, and the old town hall, and the police had cordoned off what we now know as the EDL. And these were angry men, not just wanting confrontation with the police, but trying to get at families of shoppers and stuff and trying to attack them, and everything had been locked down. And we're not that. And this movement has grown in such a positive way, where the people who stood there, even those who perhaps were that 20 years ago, have grown up themselves and have realized that if we genuinely care about children, which is what I believe everyone who we shared a space with did, then we need to come across in a different way, in a more mature way, and we need to win hearts and minds. And of course, the response now to that is these Antifa lot, the counter protesters, because they can see we've matured. We have come to terms with what are our prejudices and what do we really care about, and asked very difficult questions of ourselves, which is why they have a brown-faced Muslim man such as myself front and center of some of this work, is because whatever our differences are, those differences are insignificant compared to what has been done to our children, our nation's children, and we have a responsibility to make that right. And I was so proud of people there, because in the main they didn't react, and the provocation was severe. In the main they didn't react. And at one point, you'd gone up to speak, because I was sat next to you, stood next to you when where there's the hoardings were and stuff, and you'd gone to speak, the railing, sorry. And I looked to one side, and anyone who knows Piccadilly Gardens, you'd know that there's a little play area, for children. And I couldn't help but smile. There was a Muslim girl in a headscarf, happily playing on whatever apparatus was there with her brother. Her mum and dad sat there. And no one from our group, the Nazis, was so much as, they didn't even notice.
Yeah, exactly.
And these people are now, they're desperate to silence us. And that desperation results in a renter mob, essentially a renter mob.
And that's what they were.
Yeah. Shout, and the irony, I get up to speak, and they're shouting Nazis scum off our streets. What is it? But sorry, if you want to racialize this in this way, if you want to politicize this in this way, how dare, 50, 60 white folk, middle class white folk, shout at me Nazi scum off our streets? How dare you? If you want to look at this through that lens, how dare you?
Yeah.
And of course, I shared with the crowd there, and I'll share again. I know what a swastika is. I didn't see it in a book. I saw it painted on the front door of my house. The first time I saw a swastika was I was 5 years old, and I woke up and I was coming out, and my dad ushered me away, and I'm looking back, and it's a red paint, horrible, painted on the front door. And it was the era when you came home for your lunches. Poor kids came home for lunch. We came home for lunch, and my dad, a suited man, always wore a suit, always wore a tie, his sleeves rolled up, his blazer rolled up and put on the side. And him and my Polish neighbour, a white lad who was of a similar age, the pair of them were scrubbing the Nazi sign off. So how dare you?
And then some of the other things they were shouting, or the signs they were carrying, trans lives matter.
So the trans jihadists, I call them, right? So I look around at them, and there's a Palestinian flag, over here, next to a trans flag, and they're waving away, and I'm like thinking, carry those convictions through them, lads, right? Take that trans flag and go to the next pro-Palestinian march with it, and see what my Pakistani brethren do to you. They'll chase you out the street. You. If you want to wave a trans flag, wave a trans flag, because I come and I'm a genuine Democrat. I believe in democracy. If that's your viewpoint, that lot won't. They'll chase you down the street. In fact, they'll probably rather see an Israeli flag at those protests than a trans flag.
Yeah.
So But
It was all the usual catchphrases, signs saying Nazis off our streets, Manchester is anti-fascist, refugees welcome here, trans flags, free Palestine flags. Everything you can think of that the far left support was in that audience, counter-protest audience. All we were doing was saying we need to protect our children because many have been raped. I actually talked about, I've stopped over 15 girls and one boy being raped. I've had paedophiles arrested and paedophiles prosecuted. Not one of them was an Asian man.
no,
They're all white men. I want to protect children from whoever the offenders are. We've got offenders in the Catholic Church, Church of England, Hugh Edwards, news presenter, downloading porn, Jimmy Savile abusing kids, Gary Glitter abuse. This isn't a race thing. There's paedophiles in all groups and all communities, and we need to acknowledge that, and we need to protect children. In this particular case of the grooming gangs, we know for a fact it was predominantly Pakistani heritage men, but not 100%. There's some white men in there and black men in there and other people.
there were Bangladeshis in there. The Oxford grooming gang, the first tier groomers were from Eritrea.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
So,
Somalis as well, yeah.
Yeah, so but my issue with that is, and this is where they struggle with us. I'm very clear on the nature of these grooming gangs, that they were protected because of the fear of community relations. He had an impact in that. Yeah, if you can take it further, like I do, where you talk about the exchange for votes and all of that. But no one, not even Yvette Cooper, Jess Phillips, no one will disagree that the fear of race relations, the fear of upsetting our multicultural utopian aspiration, is what prevented people from intervening. Yeah. And hand in hand with that goes an acknowledgement that these were working class white girls. And I am of working class heritage. So, if you want to use labels, I'm comfortable being classed as working class because that's the demographic that raised me. Yeah. And I have a loyalty to them. And I look at that and I think, if it was middle class kids, it would not have been happening.
Oh, no.
No chance. In the same way, if it was Muslim kids, it would not have been happening. Now, this, in the hierarchy of race, white working class girls in particular, and boys, they're right at the bottom.
Yeah, working class girls are second from bottom.
I say, boys are.
White working class boys are the bottom.
Yeah, agreed. I completely. And I'm an anti-racist. So if you've trained me as an anti-racist, then why are you objecting to me actually, delivering on what I've been raised to believe, which is, where you see injustice, you fight against it. Because essentially that's what anti-racism should be. Where you see injustice, where you see people who are treated derogatory, in an inferior way because of the way in which we look at them, in the identity lens we see them through, then we have a responsibility to call that out and challenge that. And time after time after time in this country, the white working class have been marginalized, has been disenfranchised, and then manipulated into a place where the only people who will speak out on behalf of them are the far-right racists, the genuine nutcases. And then it's great, isn't it? Because you can wash your hands off them even more. You can, and that's why another of the reasons why I go to these events, because I have a responsibility. Yeah, and you are a white man. I am a brown-faced, Muslim, but that's immaterial in the context of the conversations we're having. But unfortunately, in the world we live in, there are certain audiences where it's useful to have me, and there are certain places where it's useful to have someone such as yourself. And that's what our teams need to be.
Exactly. Yeah. A just person is somebody who seeks justice regardless of anything else. So regardless, I find you a just person because you've put yourself out there. You can't be that popular within your own community to a certain extent.
Oh, there are people who have Buddha's issued fatwas on me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I prefer people, even if I don't disagree with them, I prefer people who are just as quick to criticize their own side, criticize their own people, their own neighbors, their own family, if they're doing something wrong. What I don't like is the hypocrisy of people who are quite happy criticising legitimately other people, but yet within their group, within their friendship circle, it's okay for us to do it. And it's that hypocrisy that gets me all the time. And that's what I find in the far left. How the far left could have protested that demonstration. The far left should have been shouting, we don't want Nazis, and the way we don't get Nazis is we need to protect all our children.
Yeah.
And then the Nazis have nowhere to go then if we protect our children.
Well, I put an offer out to him. I said, listen, if you want to hold some form of rally about protecting children and you were to invite me, I would come and speak.
Me too.
Yeah, because my position here is simple. We need to win over as many people as possible because all of our children from all of our communities matter. And that's not what they want, is it?
No.
And they were clearly a renter mob. I before I went in, I went and stood next to them, and the accents, they weren't Manx, they weren't people, they weren't full of people from Manchester.
It's got the same signs that have all been mass produced. It's the same signs and same slogans they're shouting all the time, and they're a renter mob. Now, you just mentioned middle class kids, and that if this happened to middle class kids, it wouldn't have been allowed to happen. And I know that to be true for this example. So 20 years ago, I was working for Manchester Council and the police, Greater Manchester Police, and we had a problem in Manchester City Centre with legal highs because there was many shops selling them. You could go in and buy basically artificial versions of cannabis and stuff like that, and it was perfectly legal because it was called plant fertilizer, but everyone knew it wasn't, and you bought it in these little packets. So mainly middle class kids were coming to the city centre buying it, and every weekend or two when I ran the city centre, we would have to send an ambulance to the city centre to pick up one of these kids who was ODing on the stuff, having a bad reaction. And they're always white middle class kids. And it started happening in other cities. Within 6 months, the government had a new law in Parliament, voted through, and we banned legal highs. Why? Because middle class kids were taking them and damaging themselves.
Yes.
That's how quick it can happen when it's middle class kids.
And I'm happy it did happen. I just want the same for the working class. Yeah, it is not going to happen, is it? So no, the rally was interesting. The turnout was decent, and the turnout's changed. The more and more people are. The people I spoke to, the professionals, the people I talked to were nurses, teachers, doctors, whoever, so it's not this angry crowd of.
I never sensed anger at any of them.
No.
Even when even when some of the people are saying I was abused as a child and there's never anger in the crowd. It's always empathy and sympathy. It's always like, we need to stop this so there won't be more people like you. It's never, let's go get those pedos.
No, and in the main, the frustration was not towards any other community. It wasn't saying, why aren't you Pakistanis doing more? There was nothing like the frustration was towards the state.
Yes, the government, the
police, successive governments. And why, because you have in a civilized society, we look to our leaders, we look to our government, we look to our institutions. And the criticism across all the speakers was towards the institutions in the main. And I was like thinking, okay. And of course, the challenge with those events is, I think they take a lot of effort. And the world's changed. Look, you and I are now talking now, and I would guarantee you that by the time you get this video out, far more people will have engaged in this interaction than perhaps in a rally such as that. And far more people who need to develop their understanding or perhaps came from a viewpoint counter to ours will say, okay, actually, those guys have a point. And the conversation we had just before we went live, because I'm always looking at people's equipment. Yeah. And the world's changed. And this has allowed us to fight back in a way we never would be able to fight back. And we're winning hearts and minds. We win hearts and minds.
Yeah, I mean, this is mainstream now. In fact, it's more than mainstream. It's gone international. And that was only because people like you and people like Billy and other people around the country for decades now have not let this die and have carried on. Technology's caught up, and now we can get to a bigger audience. When you were talking about how we blame the government, and we do blame the government. We blame the pedos, but pedos are everywhere, so let's deal with the pedos. But it was the government that we're really angry with. And the reason why we're really angry is because in a civilized democracy, we say, right, we won't deliver our own justice, and I won't protect my family because I'm giving those rights over to the state.
Yes.
For you to control my behaviour and my violence. But the quid pro quo is you then have to protect my family because you don't want me to do it. So we gave our rights of self-protection and looking after our family and taking revenge on people who hurt our family. We gave it to the state and they did nothing with it for us and allowed it to carry on. That's why the anger is at the government. Is that betrayal?
It is betrayal. Betrayal is the right word, and it's calculated. It's a calculated betrayal because let's look at Jess Phillips, for instance, Minister for Safeguarding Children, women, made a reputation for herself as this no-nonsense brummie who would stand up in Parliament and read the names of the women who'd been killed in domestic violence.
Yeah, I call her a gobby cow. I like women like her who are gobby cows because when I worked for the council, gobby cows in local areas like her who were part of community groups and visitor groups got things done because you couldn't shut her up and she was fearless and people would do things, and that's how I class her. And she's let herself down.
Well, she's built up this reputation rightly.
Yeah.
I would never take away what she's done. She spoke out on an issue when people weren't speaking out in the way they should have spoke out. 100%. Jess Phillips, you always have my respect for that. Yet when it came to this issue, two things happened. It's easy shouting from the outside, which is what you were doing because you were an opposition MP. But now when you're tasked with safeguarding women and children as your job in government
and have power
to do something, you didn't do it or you haven't done it, to the point where she wrote back to my council. Remember, we've fought our council for 6 years. Our council sending letters to the government is a consequence of what we've done to them. We've took them out the ballot box and they're fearful of us. And so they should be. And a politician should fear the citizens. And they wrote a letter to the government, to Jess Phillips, and she wrote back, and do you know what she said? We're too busy to meet. The Minister for Safeguarding Children is too busy to meet with a council who's pleading for help because it's been forced to recognise that the town's children have been systematically groomed and abused on an industrial scale, so much so that Andy Burnham's report refused to even put a number to the number of children in my town who've been abused over how long a period. And she was too busy. And then you look at her reaction just before Parliament closed and how they tried to sneak the backtracking of we're going to have 5 inquiries, but actually now we're not going to have any, is that they've calculated the politics here. If we do this, what's the cost? And if we don't do this, what's the cost? The cost not to the country, but the cost to them, their careers. And Jess Phillips, Birmingham Yardley, very nearly got took out by the Pakistani sectarians.
600 votes or something.
Managed to keep hold of some of the old clan, it's the clan system, so managed to keep hold of some of that. But if she does this, if she launches and supports a public inquiry, then the investigations will not just be in Oldham, not just be in Bradford, because there are a couple of grooming gang epicentres across this country. Bradford is one of them, where Robbie Moore is desperately trying to get an inquiry over the line, and they won't. It'll be over their dead body. Also, because what's she called? Yvette Cooper. Is she not MP for Pudsey or something? Is it not that way?
I can't remember.
Yeah, but there's other there's layers and layers to this. Right? But what you've also got is we know it's in Manchester. We know they've done it in Manchester. Operation Augusta.
Yep.
Birmingham is another one of those epicentres of the rape gangs. And historically, the evidence is there. I've been putting a file together. It's all in the public domain. I'm just putting it together so we can tell the story, so people understand what's happened there. But what's clearly took place is the police covered it up for community relations, the politicians covered it up, the council covered it up.
Yeah.
So how can you be Minister for Safeguarding Children and not want an inquiry into the very constituency, into the very city you represent, where thousands, if not tens of thousands, of children over decades have been systematically gang raped? How can you not? And then that you do not. We know why, because some of those arrests will go to some of those men who belong to some of those clans who rely your block vote on, and the 600 you've got has gone, and you're out of a job.
Yeah.
It's self-preservation.
It is. And I'll tell you how she circles that square. And she says to herself, yes, this isn't perfect. Yes, I wish I could do more. I wish I could stop the grooming gangs, but it will cost me my job. I don't care about that. But if I don't have my job, all the other good work I'm going to do will never be done. So she's saying to herself, I'll ignore this bit because it'll keep me in my job, because I'm going to do so much good in other places. It will balance it all out.
And again, it goes back to that. And who are we sacrificing? The white working class.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what are we failing to address? The multicultural experiment that has not worked in the way perhaps we had hoped it would have. Yeah. And they don't want to deal with either of those, do they?
They don't. Yeah. And I also think there is a danger for Labour as well. I think they've realised, or they suspect, or they're scared of, if we have a proper inquiry in this, it could be the end of the Labour Party.
Well, I think so. I've been clear with you. I remember the first time I named names with you, YouTube censored, and you had to re-edit your video, didn't you?
Yeah. Took it down and said it's what did they slander or something? And
well, where's the slander now?
Yeah.
Where's the slander now? Labour Party politicians are neck deep in the in the cover up. So much so, we've now got Maggie Oliver, who is an establishment figure. Let's be clear here. She came through the police force.
Yeah.
When she spoke out and she was horrified, and I support Maggie Oliver, by the way. If anyone says anything, I'm just reflecting on the journey she's been on. She first thought what she was experiencing was an anomaly. This is not how the system's meant to operate. Surely something's gone wrong here. And the journey she's gone on is actually, this is how the system operates across the country. She isn't an anomaly. And then she went on a journey of, well, we must speak out. We must go and get the inquiries, And she got played. And she got played by the likes of Andy Burnham because they promised her investigations, but she didn't stop to understand, because she comes from a different world. I don't blame her. She comes from a different world. And sometimes you've got to learn, ain't you? You learn through your bitter experiences. Yeah. And she's learned.
You have to trust someone at some point.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of things, it's easy to trust someone you never should have trusted.
Yeah. And Andy Burnham, she should never have trusted. Yeah. And he went on this charade of an investigation, but as Tom Crowther, the judge, responded to me on X, Andy Burnham's wasn't an investigation, it was an assurance review. An investigation is something else. Well, actually, you and I can have that debate if you want, Tom Crowther, Casey. But the vast majority of the public across the country thought Andy Burnham's assurance reviews were investigations, not reviews. They thought they were investigations, and he presented them as investigations. And so we had that, and what she found out was they lied, they deceived, so much so that the police's lawyers prevented survivors from giving testimony to the assurance reviews. And Maggie Oliver stood up, outraged in January last year, and said that. And I could see she's changing. She's changing. She's realizing she's not going to get anywhere with
the establishment.
Through the establishment.
No, absolutely.
And
do you remember a TV series sitcom called Yes Prime Minister?
Yeah. Yes Minister. Yes Prime Minister. Yeah.
So there's everything that happens in the world, you can relate back to one of those episodes. There was an episode where they were talking about the right of people to freedom of information. Before we ever had freedom of information, they talked about it 30, 40 years ago in that sitcom. And the head minister, civil servant, went, Humphreys goes, no, we don't ever want that. And his boss goes, Humphrey, my dear, put in the title of the report the thing you want people to think you're doing, and the rest of the report, do what you want. So in the assurance review, he's called it a report or investigation, because people read that and go, it's an investigation. The rest of the report is an assurance review that gives you the answer you always wanted in the first place.
They want assurances that they are no longer looking the other way to the gang rape of children.
Yeah.
That's the issue. That's it. Yeah. I mean, who commissions a report to say, please provide us with assurance? Surely, first of all, find out who did this, who was responsible, how many children are the perpetrators still. There's a whole host of questions that prioritize before. Can you please give us the assurance that the police is no longer arresting children when they go and find them half dressed with seven men in the bedroom with them?
Yeah.
Which is what they were doing. Yeah. And, well, the assurance review isn't assured. And Maggie Oliver took no assurance from that. The two investigators that they had, the experts, they always introduce them as experts, Malcolm Newsom and Gary Ridgway, have quit, run away on Burnham.
Yeah.
And Maggie Oliver has now got to a position where she's not supportive of a public inquiry. And I understand why, but I would say to Maggie Oliver, that's because you back the wrong horse all the time. With the greatest of respect, you didn't stop to understand the rules of the game that you're playing. This is, if you want to frame it that way, this is a game and there are rules to it. And you were played. And, okay, you don't need to support the independent investigation, the public inquiry that I want or the national inquiry that I want. It's completely fine.
I don't think we're going to get anything like that. And if we did, it would be a fake under the Labour government.
I say all along, this is going to define, this is one of the issues that defines who wins the next general election.
Yeah.
I'm very clear on that. So people who say to me, I've turned up to a demonstration, nothing's changed, I've done this and nothing. I said, we've been fighting for years. And long before I came along, people were fighting. So don't think it's going to change like that. Yeah. But we're now at a point because of this, where more and more people are seeing that we are not the bad people here.
Yeah.
No matter what smears they've sent in our direction, no matter how many times they've arrested us, we're not on the wrong side of history here. And I think what Maggie Oliver will do now, she's got to see it through. She's more or less raised £125,000 that she wants for private prosecutions. Now, I know what they'll do with those private prosecutions the same way you do, because you took the time to read the rules of the game. And what'll happen is, say, for instance, she goes after a politician. She should go after a politician. She should go after a police officer. There are clear people who failed. The operation, the Gold Command Group or whatever it was, who shut down Operation Augusta. There's a signature on a piece of paper there. Go after him.
Yeah.
The evidence is there. Go after him. There's I talk about Jim McMahon, who's now minister in the government. The evidence is conclusive. Go after him. There are people you can definitely go after.
Yeah.
You don't need to go and speak to another 100 survivors. It's not necessary. And also it's not necessary because what we need to give back to these survivors, and I said this to Maggie, what we need to give back to these survivors is hope that something will get done. And you've got the evidence to go after senior police officers, senior politicians, senior public officials. Take 3 test cases and run with it. You've got the money, take 3 test cases and run with it. And as soon as we prosecute them, as soon as you've submitted the files, all hell will break loose.
Oh, yeah.
Because these are powerful people that the public, it's not Maggie Oliver, it's the public who've funded Maggie Oliver, who are taking these public officials, these powerful people to court for private prosecutions because of their complicity in either partnering, allowing children to be gang raped, or covering up those crimes. So then, which then resulted in countless more children to be abused. And Maggie Oliver's got that now, and I just urge her to find that last bit of courage and step forward. Now, what do I think will happen? The CPS will take over the private prosecutions and then close them down. That's fine. Don't see that as a defeat. If you've named McMahon, if you've named Andy Burnham, whoever, is it Cook or whoever the police officer was involved, who's now head of safeguarding somewhere in the National Crime Agency. If you've identified those people and you take them to begin the proceedings, and if the CPS, because the CPS can take over private prosecutions, so the CPS will take over the private prosecutions and close them down. Let them watch the national outrage then. It'd be the best £125,000 that has ever been spent on this issue.
And getting them people into court before the CPS takes over, the best thing about that for me would be saying to them in court, I dare you to lie under oath. Because you've got no idea what information I have. And if we prove you're lying under oath, we're looking at jail time for you. None of these individuals want to go to jail. I don't think any of these individuals will risk going to jail. And once you can get one of them on the stand in front of barristers, what they're going to tell us about other people to get themselves off the hook could blow all this out.
I must say this to you because you're here. I've had a public spat with Andy Burnham. I said, I'll testify against you at a public inquiry. He goes, you'll see me there. I said, go on then. Let's have it. Absolutely, lad. Let's have it. Let's see who is telling the truth and who is lying. Because I know full well you are part of the machinery of an organisation, the Labour Party, that is neck deep in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of 100,000 children, if not more. Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, references the 100,000 now. It's not just me and you using that number. And when it plays out, the nation can decide for itself because all the evidence will be in the theatre of open court. And we see what they're doing now with documents from open court. Is it Judge Rose or what's he called? The Bradford guy? Who's the Bradford grooming gang inquiry, the court transcripts only a couple of weeks ago. Refused to release them. It's not in the public interest. It's open court. Open court. This is a prolific rape gang. Did horrible things to children, and we want the transcripts. Because we're members of the public, we have a right to court transcripts. The cost is prohibitive. Well, Adam, I think it's called, the Open Justice Foundation lad, raised the best part of £100,000 on a crowdfunder like that. Because the nation's with us, aren't they? Okay, no, there's a cover up here.
It's because we don't believe their excuses anymore. It isn't to do with cost. We know that straight.
Well, we've got the money. We've got the money. You're not releasing them now, not because of money, but because you're saying it's not in the public interest. We're the public. We know what's in our interest. We want to see those documents because we know those documents will evidence not just what happened to those children, but two other things. One is the cultural beliefs of those who perpetrated those acts, so that in the court transcripts will demonstrate how they legitimize what they did to these children. One. Secondly, it will demonstrate how these children were treated because of their class. And the third thing it will then also demonstrate is how the system repeatedly failed those, and actually intervened to cover it up. And that's what they want to keep hidden. So I look at the, what's taking place there, and every action that the state is responding with is working for us. Because it sends a clear message out to the people in this country who perhaps didn't believe you, perhaps wouldn't believe me. And the truth is the truth. This is the government who are refusing to release court transcripts. And then Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, gets up in Parliament last week and says, the cost is prohibitive. Well, we will pay. We, the public, will pay. So it's got nothing. We need AI advancements because the transcripts might not be accurate. Hamsad, every word uttered in Parliament. Have we not had court transcripts for hundreds of years in this country? And you refuse these. I'm a working class bloke, so I end up using terms sometimes that are clearly inappropriate. You need a slap. You know, as the Justice Secretary is saying, we need AI, and you know, come on. What do you think you are? We're stupid.
So if the transcripts could be inaccurate,
then the judgments are inaccurate.
Yes. Yeah. And not only that, how do we know this bit was inaccurate, or was that really said in court? So they've now just said there's no point looking at any court transcripts because they're not accurate. Again, that's another one of our systems that's completely failed. If it happens to be true, I don't believe it, by the way.
It's not true.
It's not true.
But she stood up and said it.
Yeah. Excuse.
And this is why we are winning. And I say this about, I travel the country. I'll go and speak anywhere. Invite me. I'll come across. You can see me face to face. I don't have a you can see I've got nothing pre-prepared. I've just turned up here. You know, you made me a cup of tea, and because I understand this issue. I understand what's gone on here. I've lived it for. You know, someone spoke to me recently and said, "How long have you been doing this work?" I said, "Actually, if you look at the grooming gangs, I consider it a symptom. There's underlying causes as to why it was about to happen. It's 30 years of my life." Right.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't need someone to brief me a paper. I don't need to read a pre-prepared script out. I can take anyone who has an interest in this on a journey, and I'll let you decide at the end of it. And all I ask in return is then you use your voice to tell other people that you have your networks with, actually, this is true. But then you help us. And you help us not by giving me money or you money, or if you help us by going and getting politically active.
Yeah, by voting.
Yeah, by voting, because it's the only place where we're going to win this. And it's the only reason we've got it this far. You and I are speaking here because you're a politician. You stood. You know, you knew you were going to lose, but you stood. I knew I was going to lose, but by standing, we're saying we're not fearful of you. We will fight on these principles. We'll make our stand on these issues. Yeah. And what comes next? And if we die on that journey, then so be it. But we have a duty and a responsibility. There's a moral code, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely.
You know, you come from the same world I do. You worked with the vulnerable. You worked with, and when you start working in that world, you have there's a clear moral code that you stand for what's right. And when you come across injustice, even when it's to your detriment,
yes, you
stand on the right side of history. That's why you're in your living, you're in a small room here, and and I check the fuel on my car before I set out, because it doesn't make us wealthy, does it? And it doesn't make us, popular, but it makes us right.
It helps me sleep at night. That's what it does with me. It helps me sleep at night. And I know that when I'm on my deathbed, and I mean, I'm probably an atheist. I'm not sure what I believe. I probably am an atheist. And people say to me, "Oh, and I say to them, if it turns out I'm wrong and there is a God and I die and I'm before God,
He'll forgive you, and He will say you were a good man." Because, and this is where I know I'm a Muslim, but I struggle with a lot of it, and my friends of faith struggle with me, because I judge people not by their faith, but by their deeds. And what I've learnt in life is I've seen men and women of faith do the most horrific of crimes, and people of no faith be the best people I've come across in the world,
and vice versa.
And vice versa. So who am I to judge?
Exactly.
It's not who you believe in or what you believe in; it's what you do that defines you.
Yeah, actions speak louder than words. And the person I learned that off was Jess Phillips.
and look where she is. Her position is increasingly untenable, by the way. Her position is untenable, and she's not comfortable with it. I saw her speech, and then the blowback from all the other, because they all knew she was coming in at the last minute because we prepped them. We sent messages out saying this is going to happen at the last moment, and she was hoping she'd come into an empty chamber and leave. Yeah. And they were waiting for him, and one of them was waiting for him. I mean, Katie Lamb. And I'm a fan of this posh young woman, from a rural part of wherever, and how uncomfortable she found what she did, but she was driven to do it, and she stood up and did two things. One is F the white girls, F the government, quote. That's what these men said.
Yeah.
Their motives were these were racially motivated crimes. And anyone who claims otherwise, I challenge them to look at the transcripts that they won't release and say they were anything other than racially motivated. I mean, white whores, white bitches, these phrases were all the time, consistently. Rotherham, Telford, Oxford, they're all, all the time. And then what she did was she read one of the transcripts out of what was done to this girl. And what was done with a baseball bat, and how it was used to attack her first, beat her up first, and then the man inserted the baseball bat inside her, and she quoted it word for word.
Yeah, horrendous when you hear it. Horrendous.
12-year-old children, 13-year-old children.
Yeah,
I challenge anyone. My daughter's 10 now, but you don't even have to be a parent. I challenge anyone to in any way look at what happened, and you can see my eyes, just because I've read the transcripts and they've left me scarred, and I challenge anyone to say we don't need an inquiry into that, because the truth of that is the majority of men who committed these crimes are still free to this day, because our state refused, and this goes back to the Conservatives as well as Labour, so I'm not picking sides, our state refused to intervene because of two things. One is the damage it would do to race relations and the multicultural utopian vision of what our society is. And the second reason is because of the personal cost in terms of votes. Yes.
And we've known that for a long, long time.
Thank you.
Roger, thank you much for coming along. We're going to do another one now. So if you like this, go find the other one. Cheers for coming along, and carry on your excellent work. And we need more people like you, especially from your community as well, because people from your community will be just as disgusted as other people.
And I say this to people who say to me, why aren't more people from your community coming forward? Now, there's two reasons I would share with you now. One is I am able to come forward and still be here because people in my community have protected me and kept me safe.
Yeah.
Because there are others in my community, linked to the Labour Party, by the way, who have tried to do me harm. So, there is a group from within my community who said, no, Roger is doing what he's doing and he's right to do what he's doing, and we'll protect him. So that's gone on first, yeah?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And the second thing is, look what happens when you do come forward.
Yeah.
I stop my car at night going on nowhere, going home. I lock my doors in a certain way. When I'm in with my daughter, I don't go to the parks anymore that I used to. My life is, fear is the wrong word, but I'm wary.
Yeah.
It's, to this day, I still struggle with waking up. I wake up early. I start my day at 5 a.m. But to this day, most days, most weeks, I wake up sweating because I'll hear a noise and I think it's a police trying to hammer my door down. Because they've done it and done it and done it. I wouldn't, who'd wish this on anyone?
No, absolutely. And not everybody can be a Roger Miah. Not everyone can be a Nick Buckley. We don't need people copying what we do, because we do what we do.
Amplify us.
Other things people can do.
And you can vote. Surely you can vote.
The days of silence are over. So you work out yourself what you can do, and then you do what you think you can do. It's not about us telling you what you should do. You work out what you can do to make this country a better place for our children.
And we all have a responsibility. Surely we all have a responsibility for that.
Yeah. We do.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.